Don't know whether or not to get into Fallout? Watch this review and find out whether or not it's truly special. Hello everyone, David here, and happy holidays and Merry Christmas from me, as well as Vault-Boy here. He's a very cute little figure that I managed to get specifically for this review, and also because I actually kind of liked this little guy when I saw him in GameStop. At least the GameStop that's about an hour away from me, because that's how far I needed to go to find it, because my local GameStop's sold out, and I saw him once, and I regretted not buying him. Never gonna have that same mistake again. But anyways, Vault-Boy here. It's an interesting story about this little guy is that when I was opening him up, I got the box here. Let me go ahead and set him. I'm going to set him right here on top of the TV because I actually already tested this out and he actually balances rather well on top of that. So if you see him disappear, chances are it's because he fell. But I'm going to go ahead and put him there for the review because I wanted to be present during the review. But before I get started, I just want to say that when I was opening him up, it was kind of funny how the little flaps on here have little messages on them. It says revolutionizing safety for an uncertain future on this one, and then on the and then on this one, this was the cutest, funniest one. It says +1 intelligence for opening the box. That's neat. That's really neat. Okay, so anyways, happy holidays. I hope you guys are enjoying your festivities. And I thought that I needed to post a review, a rather special review, or a special video in general, to celebrate Christmas and to celebrate the holidays. And I can't think of anything better to put up than my review of one of the most anticipated and best-selling and most critically acclaimed games of the year, Fallout 4. Now I want to start the review by saying that this is actually my first Fallout game that I have ever played. I actually mentioned this in my hour-and-a-half long playthrough, that this is the first Fallout game that I played in the series. I've been meaning to play some of the games from Fallout 3 to New Vegas, but Fallout was one of those franchises similar to Mass Effect that they would release a new game and I'm like, oh man, that looks really cool, but whenever that would come around, something else that I was actually sticking with would come out. An Uncharted game or an Arkham game or just something along those lines would come out and would just distract me from investing my time into these franchises. Elder Scrolls, something else of that manner would come out and would deviate me away from either Fallout or Mass Effect. But with Fallout 4, I told myself this is going to be the one that's going to get me into the franchise. And one of the more inviting things about it is that every Fallout game has a new story. The motif and the tone and the atmosphere, as well as the background mythology, is the same, but every story is different. Similar to the Far Cry games, where they have a similar consistency in tone and atmosphere and the way you approach the game, but every game has a different story. So I made Fallout 4 my first Fallout game to pop that Fallout cherry for me, and so here I am to bring you a review from somebody who's not only an avid gamer, but is full-on experiencing Fallout for the very first time. So that's not to undermine other people's opinions about Fallout, especially die-hard Fallout veterans, but this is gonna come from a different perspective, being that this is my first Fallout game. And while at the same time being vague to avoid spoilers, the story for Fallout 4 is that it takes place in Boston about 70 years into the future, about 60 or 70 years into the future, in which people took the lifestyle of the 1950s and 60s and basically just carried it on through to the future, and people are living a very peaceful life, but all of a sudden nuclear war breaks out and you are the sole survivor of Vault 111. So you emerge amongst Boston, also known as now the Commonwealth, and the whole place has been ravaged by nuclear fallout. And it is up to you to not only survive amongst this wasteland, but also figure out the mystery behind said war and what has happened in the 200 years that have passed since you have entered the vault in the first place. Keep in mind that I am trying to be vague to avoid spoilers, because there's certain things that happen even at the very beginning that are not being told to the public by the trailers or the gameplay footage. In fact, I remember a playthrough. I can't remember what convention it was. It might have been Gamescom. It wasn't E3 because E3 was when they announced the game. Or it might have been E3. I'm not entirely sure, but I remember a guy playing the first 20, 30 minutes, well, not 20 minutes, maybe the first 10 or 15 minutes of the game. And there was a part that they actually cut out to avoid spoilers, and they just jumped way ahead. And that's where I was playing that first 20 or so minutes, and I realized, oh, that's what they wanted to avoid showing you, because it's a very heartfelt turning point in the story. So aside from what you're shown from the trailers and the TV spots about this wanderer going around the wasteland interacting with these other characters, there's also a deeper meaning in the story that relates to loved ones and to family and stuff like that that really did feel captivating and heartfelt, despite the character being an avatar for yourself, because obviously you get to customize your character and make your own decisions, but despite that, there's still some attachment to that character that strings certain things together about this mystery about what happened in the Commonwealth ever since your character entered Vault 111. Once you emerged amongst the Commonwealth 200 years in the future, that's when it becomes more about the characters that you interact with and their stories rather than your own. Because the game is just so expansive and grants you so much freedom, and I'll talk about that more in the actual gameplay when I get to that point, but the game is just so open that the stories that people bring to you about themselves and about what they've been doing in the past couple hundred years, that becomes a bit more captivating and interesting than your own story, at least from my perspective, because that's the thing, it's very subjective. I feel like other people are gonna think that, oh, the story of the character was very heartfelt and that was their favorite amongst the stories of all these other people that you interact with, your companions, the side quest givers, or even other people amongst the main story. You'll find much more interesting than even yourself, because that's the amount of freedom that you're granted. You could put much more emphasis on other people. So the story is very rather free, and that's the care that Bethesda put into their story to make sure that everyone has a rather different experience, despite some areas that are a little, I guess you could say, railed, where it's gonna have a similar outcome, especially the ending. There's the cutscene is even the exact same thing, but I'll get to that more in depth a little later. And I will say that the actual mythology and the tone that is being carried over here in Fallout 4, assuming that it's similar to the other Fallout games, mainly Fallout 3 in New Vegas, because that's where the series kind of took a turn for what it's known by now, because I believe Fallout 1 and 2 were a little bit different. Like, the change there happened similarly to like the Grand Theft Auto franchise, where 1 and 2 were top down. They were a little bit more niche, and then it was in 3 where it became much more of an open world. It was a third person. It was in 3D. That was literally the game changer. And I hear that Fallout 3 did the exact same thing for this franchise. And so Fallout 4, from what I understand, has the similar motif, has the similar mythology, where you got this old time style to everything that is carried over from like the 50s and 60s, but then fused together with some much more futuristic technology. Basically, you take everything that you would see in the Jetsons, which was the TV program from that time, that of what they assumed the future was going to look like, only you make it gritty, you add blood, you add gore, you add language, and you practically get Fallout. And those characters that you do interact with do have some depth to them, and they become ultimately memorable. There were some characters that I wanted to see more than others, because don't get me wrong, there's so many characters here that some just didn't appeal to me as much as others. In fact, there were a couple that get introduced into the story, and then once the game grants you even more freedom in that third act, I'm kind of like, okay, bye, see ya. I'm going to spend more time with these other people, because ultimately that's what the game caters to. And like I said, it's purely subjective. Some people are going to find Piper annoying, or other people like myself are going to find Piper ultimately cute, and I was trying my best to romance her, but it wouldn't work. I got friend-zoned. And the game does offer some twists and turns, not only with its main story, but also even some of the side quests that you could go ahead and skip, but then you'll miss out on these opportunities to get a different feel for certain characters. In fact, there was one that I could have easily avoided. I could have easily just overlooked this side mission, but I went through with it, and that led to a twist to a character that I just legitimately did not see coming, and it made me sympathize with that character, which is contrary to how I was feeling for that character. Earlier in the campaign, I was like, dude, could you like lighten up? And it's when this detail gets revealed that I'm like, dude, I'm sorry for begging on you earlier in the game. And here is where the game then grants you freedom. It's within the third act, because Act 1 and Act 2 within the story are pretty, I don't want to say linear, but they just follow a certain structure that say, okay, this is the mission that you got right now, and then the next mission is this, and no outcome, there's not going to be a different outcome. It's just pretty straightforward, and it isn't until Act 3 where you are given freedom to choose between different factions to lead up to different endings for the game. And the very debatable thing about this third act is that you can look at it from different perspectives as to who you want to side with. You could be either emotionally attached to a character, or much like myself, I looked at it more from a gameplay perspective, and I sided with the faction that had bigger guns and had armor and provided me with the utilities to be able to finish the game, and because of that, it ended up becoming a little easier than I thought it would be. Maybe it's because I spent, I think about 60 or 70 hours into the game, and with that, I was able to level up myself to become a little stronger. So I guess the armor and the weaponry kind of gave me an even added boost, and therefore the ending and the climax of this game was easier than I thought it would be. But I feel like under the under the overwatch of maybe another faction that's a little bit more bare bones and a little bit more rugged, the game would have then been much more challenging. But that's the that's the consequence that you have to deal with, because there's got to be a reason for why you chose that faction. So it's ultimately up to you. Again, it's rather subjective. There's nothing that I can really nitpick about this course of that third act, except that maybe the ending cutscene is pretty much identical in all of them, and one of the missions is also pretty much identical amongst at least three of the factions. Three of the factions have this mission that has the exact same title, and because of that, it's practically the most identical mission amongst all of them, except I don't know for certain. I haven't looked it up, and I honestly don't feel like looking it up on YouTube, because the faction that I chose and the decisions that I personally made within my playthrough of the game, that's what I want to stick with. I don't want to like be, ooh, what happened there? Similar to how I treat the Telltale games and any game that allows me to make my own choices. I'm like, okay, I made my choices, and I'm gonna live with them. I'm not gonna go back and replay it. Not only that, but also it takes a while to go through this all over again because of the saves that this game actually holds within it to be able to go back into. So anyways, I feel like two or three of the faction ending missions in this game are pretty much the same, and the only one that's different is from another faction that I'm not going to spoil, but there's that one that does pique my curiosity as to how that would have played out, being that the circumstances are rather different, and I find that ultimately fascinating. I find it really funny that the Commonwealth, or Boston, even after being ravaged by a nuclear blast, still looks amazing, because a lot of detail and care went into designing the Commonwealth, and it looks fantastic. From a lighting perspective, the sound effects, the voice work behind the characters, everything looks great, and there's certain areas of the Commonwealth that look different than the others, and you can kind of see the citizens adapting to that whenever you interact with people, and that's great. And it's rather large, despite how small it kind of looks on the map. Like, you look at the map and be like, oh, okay, I can just fast travel, and you do get to fast travel in this game. But within the Pip-Boy that you open up your map on and you look at it, you're like, oh, okay, it doesn't look that big. But then as soon as you start walking there and you start to actually experience this open area of the Commonwealth on your own via just simply walking from point A to point B, that's when you realize how large and free this place is to explore. And just the way it's all held together is and designed together is really great. Of course, I cannot not talk about the presentation of this game without pointing out what is ultimately, for me, the biggest problem with Fallout 4, that is just, it kind of, it almost broke me. It almost broke me, and considering this is my first Fallout game, it almost deviated my impression to a negative light. But fortunately, the gameplay as well as the story and the way it kind of ties it all up together at the end saved it. What almost destroyed it for me would have to be the abundance of bugs in this game. Make no mistake, the bigger a game is, the more bug it's going to be. And being that this is Bethesda, who's known for delivering great gameplay experiences, but also rather large open worlds, along with those games that they put out, comes some really large and significant bugs. Some of them are kind of funny to witness. You see an NPC like doing a weird thing, or like they're trying to swim and they're like in the midair. There's a bunch of compilations you can find on YouTube of a bunch of glitches and bugs that people found in the game, and most of them are hilarious. I encountered a couple of them myself, and maybe you might see some of them in this video where you'll see like a glitch or something that just wasn't supposed to happen but ended up being rather hilarious. However, there were some bugs and errors that legitimately broke the game for me. The game did cancel out a couple of times, and my PS4 closed the application, and I had to reboot it from the last point that I saved, and that might have been a while ago, so that was ultimately frustrating. And on top of that, there are some bugs that legitimately lock out missions. And fortunately, most of these missions were side quests. There weren't any of the main quests that kept me from completing the story. But there are till at the time of this video, if I were to pop Fallout 4 back in, there would be some side missions that I didn't complete because the thing is glitched out. And I'm pretty sure there's even some more areas of the world that I have not explored, which it's a good thing because it leaves more for me to gives me a better reason to revisit the game. But that also means that there's a likely chance I'll encounter some more bugs of my own that will keep me from being able to explore those areas. So, till this day, there has not been a very significant patch for Fallout 4. There was one that was only like a 500 megabytes. And I did notice that the game ran just a tiny bit better, but I think that Bethesda still has a long way to go to deliver us a very substantial patch that will fix an awful lot of these problems. Now, even though this was my first Fallout game that I have actually played, I was familiar with the genre and what it was trying to accomplish. And basically, it is a first-person RPG, or at least first person by choice, or by default, I should rather say, because you do have the ability to switch to third person, except that Fallout was mainly associated with being in a first person perspective, because it's supposed to deliver this really engaging experience by not having any cutscenes, not having anything that kind of takes you out from the narrative, from becoming this person, especially since you get to create your own character. So the majority of the time, people will often play this game in first person, and you start off that way. So it's kind of hard to jump into third person, except for certain situations where you want to look at how your character dresses or something like that. But from the get-go, it is a first-person RPG in which you are thrust into the Commonwealth and you get to do so many things. And because there's just so much to do in the Commonwealth, I'm not going to tackle everything. I'm going to be as broad as I possibly can, but just saying that there's so much to do amongst the open world that the main quest almost becomes a side quest in and of itself, because it's just so easy to get distracted in this game. You go from different location to location, you encounter certain people, you barter with them, you sell, you trade, you put on new clothes, you get to shave your hair or your beard or whatever, change the way your character looks, make friends, build communities, create life in a sense. And so, because there's just so much to do, that main quest almost becomes a side quest in and of itself. And therefore, you can easily spend hundreds of hours in this game. Despite the main story only taking about maybe 20-25 hours, it's legitimately possible to spend hundreds of hours in this game. And the side quests, as well as the collectibles that you can go out and look for, all the tiny things that you can collect and maybe sell or keep for yourself, and everything that you get to modify, from the weapons to the ammo to... there's just so much to do to even cover in just one video. And they're all very meaty and have some kind of purpose within this world, because if you do a side quest, the reward that you get is ultimately worth it, whether it be XP or a new weapon or a new person to tag along and help you out, or a new faction or something that can lead to your advantage amongst the Commonwealth. And much to my happiness, some of these side missions have little stories within them that interact with characters from either the main quest or some brand new characters that get introduced to the side missions. And because of that, I would just find myself having that, going through that phase of saying, one more, and I would find myself doing like 5 side quests, and it's like almost 4 in the morning, and I'm still playing the game, and I have to tell myself, stop. The only thing that I was slightly bothered by the game is that the game never tells you that some of these side quests are somewhat repeats. They're mainly put in the game so that you have you have the ability to level your character up, because much like other RPGs, you get to level up your character, you get to get stronger, put up a bigger defense, get better perks, and so these side missions are repeats, and they kind of repeat again and again and again, and Bethesda never made it clear that these side missions are repeats. It isn't until maybe the 3rd or 4th time that you play the mission and the guy tells you, okay, I got a new location for you to check out. It's on your map. Go. And they start reusing the same lines of dialogue, and that's where you're like, oh, this thing never ends, does it? And it doesn't. And that is one of the flaws with the game that I've heard other people mention, and I kind of agree with, is that in some areas, not the whole game, but in some respects, the game does assume that you've played the other Fallout games, so you should be familiar with the layout of the Pip-Boy, you should be familiar with VATS, and there's certain areas where they say, oh hey, this is how you do it, but they kind of like glance over it. They never put you through like a legitimate tutorial mission. There would be little things that would appear in the corner, but they appear almost like quick tips. They don't appear like an actual tutorial to kind of guide people who are new to the franchise like myself, that say, okay, this is how you do things, because there are certain parts, mainly within the VATS system that you use, in which you get to highlight certain parts of the enemy's body so you can take them out. And of course, as you progress in the game, you'll be able to finesse your accuracy and be able to take advantage more of this system. I was foreign to it, so it was kind of difficult to point out what the little numbers meant, and it was only through trial and error that I figured out, okay, the higher the number, the more accurate the hit is going to be. But then in other instances, it would say you got 0 chance of hitting, and the enemy is right in front of me. I'm like, okay, why is that? Tell me why that is. And I'm pretty sure there's a legitimate answer, so I'm just going to post it in the comments for this video. But the game that's the game's job, to kind of walk me through that within like the first hour or so, being that the character is supposedly new to this Commonwealth, this wasteland, just as much as I am. So the game shouldn't just automatically assume that I have played the other games, and no game, despite being a sequel, should do that. In another area, and it might just be me, I might just be complaining here, but I think another area in which the game assumed that you have played the other games and you should be familiar with how the combat works and how the weapons work is the difficulty. Because man, this game starts off rather ruthless, rather unforgiving, to the point where they lunge out this death claw and they're like, okay, go kill it. And it's this giant monster thing, and I'm like, oh my god, and I would die just so many times. And of course, as the game progressed, I got stronger and I would die less and less frequently, but still, to put me through some really rage-quitting moments early on in the game, that's just not really fair. I expect challenging, not want to throw my controller at the screen and break it. Especially since the autosave areas of this game are rather broad. And because of that, I thank Bethesda and God that there was a quick save function. And because there was that function, I would often find myself entering a room, clearing it out, and then almost immediately pressing pause, quick save. Pause, quick save. It's that type of game. But don't worry, Vault-Tec is here for you to make your experience a little less frustrating, at least, because thanks to the perk system in this game, you're able to progress in the game, get stronger, add perks to your character so that they can take less damage, or that they can take less radiation when they're amongst the Commonwealth and they're either drinking radiated water or they're out and about and suddenly a radiation storm goes through that location. And this perk system is, to say the least, rather addictive, because I would just gaze at this poster whenever I would bring it up every time my character would level up. And not only are there let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 little columns where we got strength, perception, and endurance, charisma, intelligence, agility, luck, which make up special. And amongst them, there's like 10 more levels, so you got about close to 70 perks there. And then within each perk, there's an additional rank that you can level up that certain perk to make it even more effective. So there's literally about hundreds, probably a little over 100, between 100 and 200 upgrades possible. And that's how much you can level up and spend within the wasteland trying to level up, trying to defeat more enemies and gain more XP. And that alone is addictive to use. Plus, you're granted more weapons, you're able to carry a lot more, you're able to upgrade your armor a lot more, modify your weapons as well as your armor with different little perks and added bonuses to add some kind of effect to, like, whenever you shoot a gun, it blows out fire, so that ammo would not only hit but also light up your enemies on fire. And so there's just so many additions to the combat for this game that it's just so hard to turn away from it. I just wish I could have leveled up the intelligence of my companions, because maybe it just might have been me, but I doubt it. The companion AI in this game is tremendously stupid. That's another bug that I think Bethesda needs to work on. I think out of all the bugs in this game, I think the companion ones need to be put on the priority list, because these are the NPCs that are supposed to tag along with you to be able to help you out and help you progress through the game. And there were so many times where I would just be like, let's go home, go to Sanctuary Hills, go somewhere else. Especially Dogmeat, who would get himself killed every single time, or wounded, and then you have to go over there and stim-pack them. But so many, and it wasn't just Dogmeat. Paladin Dance, another character that has power armor, supposed to be this really tough guy, and so many times whenever I would enter an elevator, I'd be like, dude, go over here. Go into the elevator, please. Now, from a story and writing perspective, I already covered Act 3 and the directions that it can take and the factions that you can team up with that leads to different endings, even though the cutscene is still the same. But a couple of other things to point out is that it does treat it in a realistic fashion where even though that climactic mission is similar amongst 3 of the 4 factions, there's a mission right before it that can play out in different ways, and because it's supposed to be treated realistically in terms of who you side, you're going to make enemies. You're going to make friends, and along with that comes enemies. And because of that, whenever you would complete a certain mission, another one will get failed. Another one that was given to you prior to the events of that mission will then get failed, and then somebody will then become your enemy, and the game will tell you, like, hey, now you can't side with these people. They're going to shoot you on sight because of what you did. And I love the realistic approach to that. Plus, despite completing the main quest, it wouldn't be an open world RPG if it didn't let you explore that world even after the fact. And I'm not going to go into detail with the story, but the game does grant you availability to keep playing it even after the story. And trust me, there's plenty within this game, from side missions to collectibles, to encourage that. I beat the story, and then 2 or 3 days later I was still playing the game, trying to complete as much as possible before moving on to the next game. So from a former Fallout virgin, what is my final verdict on Fallout 4, which was a game that a lot of people were waiting on for literally about years. I think it's been about 7 or 8 years since the last one, New Vegas. And a lot of people perceive that as a good game, but it didn't live up to par with the game changer that was Fallout 3 from what I've heard. And after playing Fallout 4, I can say that I would definitely not mind checking out Fallout 3 and New Vegas, not just because I've already purchased the games, but also because I would actually like to open them up and invest my time in them, just like I invested my time with Fallout 4. Even after beating the story, I was like, I want to explore, I want to continue leveling up, I want to finish off these little loose ends that I started with some of these side quests and the characters within them. But it's not without its flaws. It's not a perfect game, and there are some moments that made me rethink the time that I was investing in it, especially when it came to the technical aspects and those bugs that really did, you know, it is a little contradictory to what the game is trying to achieve. It's trying to have you invest all this time within it, but then you risk the possibility of coming across a bug that's going to break the game and have you, and set you back like an hour or so because of how large the gaps are between the out of save points that you just need to constantly hit quick save, and quick save. But if you were to invest the time, the game is willing to reward you. Now, from what I've heard other people say, that other people that have played all of the other Fallout games, they consider Fallout 4 to be a step down from 3 and New Vegas, or mainly 3, that apparently Fallout 4 catered more to casual gamers more so than the hardcore, die-hard Fallout fans. And that's their prerogative. That's obviously not mine, because this is the first Fallout game that I played. But from that perspective, I can say that Fallout 4 is certainly one of the best games of the year. It's just that there's certain areas where I felt like it fell a little bit short from achieving masterpiece potential, especially in the technical department. So I give Fallout 4 a low 9 out of 10. I literally would not mind popping it back in and playing some more of it, especially if Bethesda does release a patch to fix some of the issues that would make the game a lot more enjoyable to traverse, as well as some future DLC that they maybe might be putting out before their next game, whether it be Fallout or Elder Scrolls or anything that they have in the works. For now, I can just say that I give this game a thumbs up. So, let me know what you guys thought of Fallout 4. If you have played it but you have not and would like to purchase the game after watching my review, then be sure to use the link in the description below. It would really help me out a lot. Thank you guys for watching, and if you excuse me, I'm going to go ask my girlfriend how our relationship is so that then she can give me free food. I'll see you guys next time. Take care, and happy holidays.
It's a long story.
Either way, good to see a new face. How about you? Ever think about working the land?
You're not holding her prisoner, are you?
No, she's not a prisoner. She's just locked in her room until she comes back. I'm afraid, threatening to run off. You know how women can get.
I hope you decide to become one of the pillars of the community.